Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week from Missouri for now. And if you would like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Jason is engineering the broadcast. Dr. Shealy, are you blissed? Dr. Shealy, I'm broadcasting via the plain old telephone line this morning until I get the equipment running. So it's called POTS, P-O-T-S. Literally, that's the industry descriptor for the landline. POTS, P-O-T-S, stands for literally plain old telephone service. That's what POTS stands for. Seriously, that's what the telephone technicians, when they come to your house, they call these POTS lines, and they work great. It's the other stuff that doesn't work so well. So, Dr. Shealy.
That's all I use.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you'd like to share with us before we get into today's broadcast?
I don't think so. Whatever's up.
Okay. So I was reading an article, Breitbart News, and Breitbart.com. Headline, Coronavirus outbreak exposes China's monopoly on U.S. drug and medical supplies. And it says that the coronavirus outbreak has exposed the United States' dangerous dependence on China for pharmaceutical and medical supplies, including an estimated, and hold on, guys, you're not going to believe this, 97% of all antibiotics and 80% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients needed to produce drugs in the United States. Is that unbelievable?
Well, it's believable because of the unbelievable idiot craziness of our industry and our government. It should never, ever have happened. I hope they all go bankrupt as a result.
Well, if you're wondering who made this happen, a lot of it happened under William Jefferson Dwight Clinton's administration.
Well, let's face it. Let's face the fact that, Clinton is as bad as the evil empire altogether. The Committee of 300, etc.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Oh, I agree. My opinion as well. Dr. Shealy, what we're seeing now is the supply chain fractures. And let me give you an example. Over the weekend, I got a call from a friend who needed, and this was on the East Coast, a friend who needed a part for his Chevrolet, common vehicle. And the part is required for engine timing within the engine. Now, we've had to buy the same part for a less common vehicle in Missouri, a Dodge, an older 1999 Dodge pickup truck with a diesel engine. So there are plenty of Dodge pickup trucks, but not all of them have this diesel engine. So the diesel engine's a little more rare, and the part for it would be more rare. It's the same part that controls engine timing, and the person on the East Coast needed one and couldn't get one at all of the automotive stores in the city. And it's a fairly large city, about 200,000 people. And none of the, and I'm not talking about just AutoZone, I'm talking about all of the different stores could not deliver this part. They're all out of this one part. I think, I can't say that this is a scientific example of what's happening, but it is indicative that it's going to be harder and harder to get parts from China, and that's where this automotive part comes from. And so not only are we dependent on China for the completed assemblies, but we're dependent on China for the parts that go into the assembly. Are you seeing any disruptions in your medical practice, Dr. Shealy?
No, not yet, but, that's because I don't use much conventional stuff.
Right. Well, are you hearing any rumors?
I haven't.
Okay.
Let's face it, the establishment is not going to let it out of the bag until it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
You don't expect them to let you know there could be something coming.
Right. Well, let's see. To go on, it says, perhaps the biggest concern is over medical supplies. China produces and exports a large amount of pharmaceuticals into the United States, including 97% of all antibiotics and 80% of the active ingredients used to make the drugs here, meaning in the United States. Penicillin, ibuprofen, and aspirin largely come from China. Last month, the medical supply firm Cardinal Health recalled 2.9 million surgical gowns cross-contaminated at a plant in China. The blood pressure drug valsartan also saw shortages recently thanks to the tainted active ingredients at one Chinese plant. The combination of supply chain disruptions and the increased demand at hospitals if the coronavirus spreads to the United States could prove devastating.
Well, I can say the industry deserves whatever happens.
Mm-hmm. In a dark irony, most of the world's face masks, now ubiquitous in China as a precaution, are made in China and Taiwan. Even for those made elsewhere, some components are Chinese sourced. Shortages have led China to declare the masks a strategic resource. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Reserving them for medical workers. U.S. hospitals are critically low on respiratory masks, according to medical supply middlemen. Lack of protective gear could increase vulnerability to the virus, and the one place on Earth suffering from the production of shutdowns is the one place where most of this protective gear originates. So what they're saying is the need is in China and the manufacturing is in China. And who would have thought that something as simple as a face mask is not produced in large numbers in the United States? Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that we have to buy ours from China?
Well, that means that the people in charge have not been thinking straight. They've been thinking in what I would call greedy, insane ways.
Yeah.
And every one of them deserves to go bankrupt.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And Dr. Shealy, another problem that we're having, that and this is in China, and my grandmother used to say, don't touch that money. What she meant was currency. She meant Federal Reserve notes with George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and so forth on them. She said, that money's dirty. And she said, you don't know where it's been. People touch it with their hands. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And in China, right now, they have begun disinfecting currency.
I saw that, yeah. Oh, boy.
What are your comments about that, Dr. Shealy?
Well, insanity is worldwide. I don't know what else to say.
What about us in this country? Would you consider using protection, disinfection of currency here?
Well, yes and no. I mean, once it's disinfected, once it's back in use, it's infected again.
Correct. But before you use
it, you can't disinfect it every time you use it.
Right. Right. Every time you use it, you have to disinfect it. That's exactly right.
There's no way of doing that.
Yeah. Well, my concern is that when I engage in transactions that I don't contract, the coronavirus or any other virus. And one thing that's happening, in my estimation, is that people are focusing on just the coronavirus. But this is symptomatic of everything, correct?
Yep.
So when we should think about handling, that sub sandwich that was made by, that guy or gal behind the counter sneezing, rubbing his or her nose, scratching their face. Who knows if they washed their hands. Let me give you an example. I went through TSA many, many years ago, and the guy said, I'm going to have to pat you down. And I said, would you change your gloves, please, because I don't know where they've been. Yeah, absolutely. I would do that every time. Here's another example. So I was going through the airport, and I said, is that X-rays? Oh, I'm afraid of X-rays. And they said, well, we'll have to pat you down. And I said, okay. And the guy said, I'm going to test you for gun residue, explosives. I said, okay. And so he was going to use these gloves. And I said, how does this work? He said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the gloves. I'm going to test this pad that I use, and this machine will ring the alarm if it comes up positive for explosives and gun residue and gunpowder. I said, okay. Well, can you test those gloves first? And he tested the gloves, and the machine went off.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, what would have happened if you had used those gloves on me and then tested me, and the machine went off? Oh, well, we'd go into the room, and then, we'd get a chance to spend time together, and I would have been terrible. And so I explained that, geez, boy, it's such a good thing that we tested those gloves first, right? What I'm saying is you have no idea, you class, meaning everybody, us, Dr. Shealy, me, all of us, we have no idea where the gloves that are used on us have been before. We don't know if the guy has syphilis and it's itchy. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. So always make sure that if you are in a situation such as I was, that you make them change their gloves. And if they're going to use a machine to test for some kind of residue, you have it tested, have those gloves, have that pad tested first before they use it on you and then run it through the test again. So make sure it doesn't test positive before they use it on you. So I don't know if it was planted, if they were deciding that they were going to have fun with me and they were going to put me in that rubber room while they beat me up. I have no idea what they were going to do, but I made sure that, from the best of my ability, I prevented it. Dr. Shealy, and I will be right back. Jason, I think I've got the network up and running, and the high-speed digital communications, I believe, is going to work. So if you can prepare for that, that would be great. Dr. Shealy, and I'll be right back.
Technology is great when it works sometimes, and what I mean by that is when it works for positive things, it's wonderful. But when it doesn't work, it can really mess you up. And if you think about it, let's say 15 minutes before the broadcast started this morning, I powered everything up, and I realized that the digital communications component of the studio wasn't working. So the computers were working, the network was working, the network switch and all that was working. But what was not working was the equipment to convert the analog signal from the microphone and the microphone mixer to digital and send it out across the internet. That was the part that wasn't working. So if you think about it, as we go farther down this road with the coronavirus, what is it that you have that you need to have working and that you really don't want to be without or can't be without? And do you have a backup plan for if that does not work? So, for example, that was just a little fire drill this morning here. The standard communications didn't work, so what did I do? I picked up the plain old telephone line and dialed in on a landline. So that's plan B. But what if we didn't have a plan B? And where we live, cell phone service is virtually non-existent. So if you have a cell phone out here and you want to make a call, lots of luck, because it hardly works. Dr. Shealy, any comments about having what you need before you need it in this emerging chaotic situation?
Well, you may remember that we discussed this last week, and I ordered a year's supply of toilet paper, and I wound up with a 2-year supply.
Well,
the rolls were twice the size I've ever had before, but I've got enough to last a long time.
The neighborhood size.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do remember that, and we have been topping off on supplies. But, Dr. Shealy, I've got to tell you, up until a couple of days ago, and I haven't checked since, I haven't been out since, but it seems like nobody really is understanding that this is a real big problem. A really big problem. And let's go into why. Let's see. I'm looking for okay. All right. So we know that the pharmaceuticals are produced mostly in China. Let's get a little bit more into detail on this. According to Breitbart, about 40% of generic drugs sold in the United States have only a single manufacturer. About 40% of generic drugs sold in the United States have only a single manufacturer. A significant supply chain disruption could cause shortages for many of these products. Now, that's obvious. Last year, manufacturing of intermediate or finished goods in China, as well as pharmaceutical-sourced medical material, accounted for 95% of U.S. imports of ibuprofen. So without foreign products made in China, we couldn't make ibuprofen because 95% of the material required for making ibuprofen is from China. 91% hydrocortisone. 70% of acetaminophen. 40 to 45% of U.S. imports of penicillin. And 40% of U.S. imports of heparin. So what we're saying is we are in dire straits in terms of manufacturing or providing pharmaceutical drugs without China. And we didn't know this, Dr. Shealy. I mean, we thought this, but now it's coming out. It's coming out so that it's for all of us to know that China has us by the throat. When we come back, Dr. Shealy, can you talk about what do we do? Ibuprofen, hydrocortisone, acetaminophen, penicillin. What do we do without those products, those pharmaceuticals? What do we do? What do we get? And how do we avoid needing them, if possible? We'll be right back with Norm Shealy, normshealy.com. And we're talking about the coronavirus. Rich Eben, welcome. Hey, Rich Eben.
Great to be on with you. I wanted to mention a couple things, Vince. You told me to chime in today real quick. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Beijing is hunting down Chinese citizens, challenging the official coronavirus narrative. And as you know, even medical workers are detained for sharing coronavirus videos. So there's a lot of suspicion going on. There's a lot of chaos and criminality behind the scenes. And there was a federal arrest recently by a doc, and the federal agents arrested a Dr. Charles Lieber, who is a chair of Harvard University's Department of Chemistry and Biology. he was lying to the Department of Defense about monthly payments that he was getting paid $50,000 per month by China in order to set up chemical, biological resource. Apparently, 2 other Chinese students, in quote, were arrested. One turned out to be a lieutenant in the Chinese army. And one tried to smuggle out 21 vials of sensitive biological samples, as per the FBI. So I just think there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that is quite scary. And there's two subjects I would like the good doctor to address. First of all, the coronavirus, a lot of information from everywhere is being squelched. Even if you recall last week, CNBC has been actually talking about the origins of the coronavirus. However, Zero Hedge, when they've been talking about it for weeks previous, they basically got banned on Twitter and social media. So only certain groups obviously can give out information if it's sanctioned by the powers that be. And the 2 topics, Dr. Shealy, I really want you to address is HIPAA regulations. You know, I think we all realize that HIPAA, basically when it boils down to it, protects the establishment from the inadequacies of the system. And we all know that this is a disease that you can be asymptomatic for up to 24 days. The virus can live for 9 days. This is the latest data. And the diseases, the bacteria, can be spliced. And this is proven to be now a geoengineered bioweapon. And the second thing I want you to address, Dr. Shealy, is the 2 biggest funders of the World Health Organization, known as WHO. When you really look at who really pays the majority of the bills, it's the U.S. and China. Now, if U.S. has been semi-conquered, at least temporarily from within, and China, who is the second biggest funder of the World Health Organization, which is deeply connected at the hip to the United Nations, we really have to put an asterisk around coronavirus facts and parentheses, because obviously we cannot believe a word that comes out of China regarding this particular instance. And I was wondering if you could address those things. And folks, gentlemen, I want to thank you for allowing me to give these questions. I'm going to get off the air here. And
you can stay with us. Rich, you can stay with us and make sure your questions are answered.
Okay, I just hate to take Dr. Shealy's time away, but I think those are 2 very important issues, comments and questions that need to be addressed. Dr. Shealy?
Well, obviously, nobody knows anything in this entire thing. Let's face it. There have been more rumors about this particular thing than I can remember about anything in history, and they counter one another often. But let's assume that either it is a real virus or a created virus for warfare. Either way, viruses can kill you. And if it is the serious virus that is sometimes associated with this particular name, then we almost certainly will have a pandemic. As far as the World Health Organization, or the world, I put it with the evil empire, as I do the United Nations. I don't want anything to do with either one of them. So we are stuck on our own, and we do the best we can. Now, for your information, just because I thought it was going to come up while something was going on, I looked up where is the plain old ascorbic acid, which is the primary source of vitamin C, made. I haven't been able to find it. I found one thing that says it was, for decades, made in New Jersey. But they don't say where it's made now. And the fact that it says was suggests that it's no longer even made in this country. So if vitamin C, or the ascorbic acid that's made into vitamin C, is made only in China, folks, we're in it deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely disconcerting, to say the least. Just like I did once in a while, you get an article that doesn't get purged real quick, and it gets to the people. And I read one article about 2 weeks ago that vitamin C in high doses was doing wonders for this virus and other viruses, which a lot of those therapies have been squelched, just like vitamin B17. And I think there's a lot of information that the powers that be do not want to get to the people. It's just like self-sufficiency. They don't want people to be self-sufficient. They want to move them to urban, suburban America. They want to have their skill sets be lost. They don't want them to harvest rose hips in the wild and edible medicinal plants like chaga and to boost immune systems. And it's definitely a concern. That's one of the reasons why USAPrepares.com is on the air, to give options and outside-the-box ideas to the people. But when you have big organizations and establishments, whether it be WHO or the UN or any of them, the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, the Federal Reserve, we've talked about all these things. It's if everything has been attacked at the upper hierarchy levels, we can't expect correct information getting to the people. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we are on the air. But, whether it be any organization, I think we need to tell people how to build our immune systems and concentrate on immune stimulants versus immune.
Right. Well, I've used significantly since 1978 or 9 IV vitamin C as my major support for the immune system. And if it is made only in China, we are really up a deep creek.
Yeah.
Dr. Shealy, I believe, I don't have proof of this, but I believe that a lot of the tubing and the IV bags themselves are from China. I can't prove it yet, but I believe that is the case. And if that's the case, and if China decides they're going to take care of themselves before they take care of the rest of the world, we're all in trouble.
I agree.
Because those IV bags are used for every kind of surgery I can think of. And one of the first things that happens if you end up in the emergency room, you pretty much get an IV drip. I mean, almost immediately. Isn't that almost always the case, Dr. Shealy?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look at all the supplies in transit right now that's stuck out in sea that's not allowed to come into the country, into our ports. So this disease is definitely, I think the people don't know how contagious this is. And if you can be asymptomatic for up to 24 days and still be contagious, that's very concerning. And Vince, right before I came on the air, I heard you talking about an article that I was going to discuss tomorrow, where 80%, 80% of China's exports basically monopolizes not just drug, but medical supplies as well. And that includes the U.S. supply of antibiotics, which are made in China. So if they indeed are an enemy, I mean, we all know that Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese operative, a spy, working for her for 20 years. We all know that Hillary Clinton had a private server that was probably, I hate to use the word attack because it looks like all this information was set up on a silver platter to whoever wanted it, including China. We all know that Bloomberg makes a fortune from China on a weekly basis that the rest of us will not make in our lifetimes. So there's definitely a lot of traitors, a lot of sedition, and some people are being paid huge amounts of money for information and commerce not going in the right directions. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. Dr. Shealy, thanks for letting me break in. I'm going to, I got a bunch of stuff I got to do.
I have just looked it up, and most IV supplies are made in China.
Yeah. Yeah. Gentlemen, you guys have a great show. Have a great day, and Vince, I'll be with you tomorrow.
Great. Thank you. Rich Sheevan in Montana. Thank you.
And, of course, that means,
Dr. Shealy,
that means that if the IV bags come from China, how are they going to be disinfected before they're used?
well, you bring up a very, very important point because, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't our skin the first layer of defense against pathogens, biologicals, chemicals? And so our skin prevents those agents from going into our bloodstream. But if you have an IV bag that's contaminated, you get it right into the bloodstream, which makes it way more difficult to treat.
Of course. And I doubt seriously that there's any way of any consistent checking of things like that when they come in.
So, Dr. Shealy, here's we've got a caller it's ringing. So, if you're calling, just let it ring. Jason will pick up the phone and put you on hold. So just let it ring, and we'll get to you. Dr. Shealy, I was thinking for the last couple of weeks, the U.S. mail, the mail lady comes to mailboxes, drops off letters, envelopes, packages, and so forth. And then what do we do with those? I can almost guarantee that most people will get the mail, bring it into the kitchen, and put it on the kitchen table or the kitchen counter where they prepare food. Correct me if I'm wrong, class. Is that what we do? I think that's what we do. Is that going to change, like, right now? Has that just stopped right now? I hope so. Let's talk a little bit more about that when we come back, Dr. Shealy. Dr. Norm Shealy is with us. Dr. Shealy, in China, as of right now, there are almost 29,000 hypodermic needle suppliers right now in Asia. The top supplying country is China. And it looks to me like that almost all hypodermic needles are made in China. So we just found out that the IV bags are Chinese. We found out that most vitamin C is from China. Now we know that most hypodermic needles are from China. Now of course, if you look at the humans and the need for hypodermic injections, we all know about that. And we don't like getting injections and needles. But let's swing over to farmers. Class, if you visit any farmer's farmhouse, and let's say they raise animals, and they can be sheep, goats, cows, large animals, pigs. A lot of times they will need an injection of some kind, whether it be an antibiotic, whether it be a vitamin, or whether it be hydration, an IV bag, when they're down. If those almost always come from China, if the medications, the vitamins, the supplements, the antibiotics, if they come from China, how will that impact our food supply? I guess it's going to be a serious problem. Now, for us, as farmers, we have hypodermic needles. So and we're gonna reuse them. The once disposable hypodermic needle is now not disposable. But what about the plunger and the syringe itself? Dr. Shealy, aren't almost all hypodermic needles now, the complete assembly, the needle cover, the plunger, and the whole thing, isn't that disposable?
Yes,
Okay. And let me ask you this. When was the last time you saw available for sale a glass hypodermic injection system with a reusable needle? When was the last time you saw one of those for sale?
50 years, maybe.
Isn't that interesting? 50 years. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, doctors' offices used to have a sharpening stone that would sharpen the hypodermic needle that had been used so many times that it became dull, and they've resharpened them, sterilized them, and reused them. Isn't that right?
That is correct. When I was in medical school, that was the way it was done.
Well, interesting thing, our son, within the last couple of years, was at a veterinarian's supply house where we got injectables for our animals, should they ever need them. Like, there's a multivitamin that they get that we inject the cows if they're not well. It's rare, but they had brand new, old stock, and I think from 40 or 50 years ago, the ground glass hypodermic. What is that called? The part you hold your hand, the glass part with the plunger, the syringe.
Syringe, yeah.
Yeah. And they couldn't wait to get rid of them. $1 a piece. $1 a piece. Now, what was considered something nobody wanted a couple of years ago would probably be in extreme demand now. Brand new. So, Dr. Shealy, can we reuse hypodermic needles if we have a way of sterilizing them?
Well, yes, if you could autoclave them. I mean, the only way you could truly be sure they're autoclaved, they're sterile, is not boiling them. That's not quite good enough. It would be autoclaving. So if you don't have an autoclave, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, an autoclave is what, over 200 degrees?
Yeah, and it's under pressure.
Okay. So would you consider it like a pressure cooker?
Yeah. It's heated in a pressure cooker. That's essentially what it is.
Okay. So that's the homeowner's way of doing it. Okay, but what about getting the serum out of the hypodermic needle? That would require an ultrasonic cleaner, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so now we need two devices. So then let's extrapolate this out. So I'm sure you all have been to the ladies' rooms and the men's rooms where you see hanging on the wall a hypodermic needle disposal system, What's the likelihood of those being ripped off the wall? It sounds like a real high likelihood of those being ripped off the wall to reuse those once considered trash, hazardous waste, now is going to become a valuable commodity. I think that's going to happen. I really do. We'll be right back with Dr. Norm Shealy. Everyone all set? List? Dr. Shealy's with us, normshealy.com, normshealy.com. And that's where you can order your vitamins, minerals, supplements, books. And I get Youth Formula and my daily vitamins from Dr. Shealy. I go right into the clinic in Springfield and I buy them there. I suggest you consider getting yours now. Dr. Shealy, I just read an alarming statistic. So from the year 2001 to 2010, the average number of hypodermic needles used per year in America, 4 billion. 4 billion. And then it almost doubled after 2011 to 7.8 billion disposable hypodermic needles used per year. Now, I'm certain that they get recycled and made into new needles, right? These things are made out of stainless steel, and they won't decompose for millennia. They're here to stay. 7.8 billion of them a year. And that's just the United States. Dr. Shealy, is that alarming or what?
Well, yeah. I mean, what the hell is going on? I wonder how many of those are used in medicine versus outside medicine, or do you know whether those used in by drug dealers or drug takers versus real people?
I do know the number. Now, it was about from 2001 to 2011 about 500,000 per year illegal hypodermic needle uses. Now, well, up at 2011, which is almost 10 years ago, it was 1.5 million, so 3 times as many. So 1.5 million illegally used, discarded hypodermic needles from illegal drug use. And if you think about it, what's the likelihood of those going in landfills or the ocean? Like almost 100%. Going one place or the other.
By the way, did you see the article yesterday that some company is now making highways, roads, out of used plastic bags instead of asphalt?
Yeah.
And it says it lasts 3 times as long.
Let me explain my understanding of roadways. So we start out with crude oil, and we have fractional distillation. So what happens is we'll say we cook it, and we have a pipe that goes vertical. And at different heights, there are taps, and the taps are used to extract the boiled off, if you will, crude oil. So the lowest part of the pipe, the vertical pipe, would be the heaviest of the petroleum products, thick, gooey stuff. Then heavy oils. And then at the top would be very, very light petroleum products. Gasoline is near the top. Diesel is a little bit lower. Engine oil is a little bit lower than that. And so that's how it works. But the bottom, when you're done cooking all of this petroleum, this crude oil, you're left with some black goo. And what they do is they make roads out of that. They add some crushed stone, and that becomes blacktop. So what would we do with plastic bags? Well, naturally, we need to make roads with them, add them in. But here's something else that we add in. Broken glass. So when you have those wine bottles and those jars and you bring them to the recycling center, you think that they're going to make new glass out of it. Maybe. But a lot of it goes into being crushed as the replacement for stone. And that's why sometimes you see the roads sparkling when they're freshly paved, because it's crushed glass in the roads. So I don't know. I think there's a better use for glass than that. I think that would be have just standardized jars. Let's say a mayonnaise jar, a quart, half quart, maybe 4 ounce, maybe 1 ounce. And all the lids are the same for each size. And if you want wine bottles, there's only one size wine bottle, unless it's a gallon. So you get a gallon or a fifth, and that's it. And then beer is in recycled glass bottles. Soda, if you happen to want to poison yourself with that, recycled glass bottles and recyclable. So, I saw an old TV show, Dr. Shealy, and there on the counter was like a bottle of Pepsi. And the guy was fumbling with the can opener or the bottle opener to get the cap off. That's what we used to do. And then we would recycle them. You pay a deposit, then you bring the bottles back. And they'd be washed and refilled. We didn't throw them away, but that's what we do now.
Vince, are the bottles for wine and food made in China today?
That I don't know, but I would bet that pretty much everything is. There used to be a company on the East Coast called Libby Glass, and they made jars. But I think they closed. Kyle in Montana, welcome. You're on with Dr. Norm Shealy.
Good morning, guys. Dr. Shealy. Vince, all these years I was thinking that sparkly thing on the road when I was driving, I thought I was headed to Oz, but I have not ever got there.
Yeah.
Actually, what I had was, and I apologize if you've already covered this. I haven't been able to tune in till now. But, Dr. Shealy, I had a question for you on this coronavirus. Have you ever, in your entire career, ever heard of a virus that had a 14-day contagious incubation period?
Well, no, but look, everything we've heard about this virus is debatable at best. Have you heard anything that's a stable fact?
Well, no, everything is speculation pretty much. Anything that comes out of China you have to take with a grain of salt, and it has to weigh about 5 pounds.
Yeah. And we've learned. We've learned from this coronavirus that we can't believe anything that the Chinese say. Nothing. We can't believe their numbers. We can't believe that the ingredients for that they sell the United States manufacturers for dog food, we can't believe that is safe. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Finelli, during the top of the hour break, I went into the kitchen at the farmhouse to see Mrs. Finelli, and she said she was reading what companies say about their supplements. Things like, and this is a recap, this is not verbatim, but things like we test our products. We test them for bacteria. We test them for yeast. We test them for toxins. But they don't say they make them. So what these companies have become, these American companies, are their bottlers. They buy bulk and they put it in smaller containers. That's what they do. And there's a company in Springfield, Missouri, where we get our steel 50-gallon or 55-gallon barrels that we use here at the farm. And they come from Africa. And food products come in them. So what this company does is they buy the syrup or the ingredients in 55-gallon barrels, and then they decant it into smaller sizes, and then they sell it on eBay. So if you think that, some company in Springfield, Missouri is actually growing and making these products, you're probably mistaken. Now, how do we know? Because we have the barrels. And let me tell you, do you think they're stainless steel barrels? Or glass? No. They're steel. And what's on the inside? Paint. They're painted so they don't rust. From Africa. Y'all ready to get sick? I'm not kidding. I've got the barrels here. I've got 6 of them. And we don't put food in them, but I'm sure people have eaten the products that come from those barrels. Kyle, have you ever heard of anything like that, or did you ever suspect that?
I have never heard of it before in my life, Vince. First time for me. I just was curious about one other thing, and I apologize if you guys have already covered this on this coronavirus. Dr. Shealy, have you heard anything like they say that the normal flu has a death rate of like 0.1%, but they also say that this coronavirus has a death rate of 2 to 3%. Again, the huge grain of salt. But if that's true, that means that it has a 20 to 30 times more, it's more lethal than the normal flu. And I was just wondering, have you heard, or do you have any way of finding out anything on those things? Because I've heard that it has some kind of a receptor to this flu that is in the lower parts of your lungs, and it affects Asians worse, seemingly, than it does, because according to what I've read a little bit and heard, the Asians tend to have more of this type of receptor in their lungs than everybody else. And I was just curious if you'd heard anything like that.
I have heard nothing that I consider fact since the beginning of this particular demonstration, if you will, of worldwide terror. I've heard nothing that anybody could consider a fact.
Dr. Shealy, what are your thoughts about an atomized colloidal silver inhalation as a therapy should someone get this? Is there any indication that would be dangerous, or is that something that should be considered with the appropriate research?
Again, I just don't. I don't think we're ever going to know until it's over one way or the other.
Okay. Would you
research
consider
of this kind of thing would take months? You don't do it in a week or two.
Okay. Kyle, have you heard, or Dr. Shealy, have you heard that China is now, the government of China is now encouraging those who live in China of turning neighbor against neighbor? What I'm saying is there is a reward. If it were in U.S. Federal Reserve notes, it would be about 140 of those. 140, we'll call them dollars, if you turn in someone who has the symptoms of the virus to the government. That's how serious this is. Gentlemen, if you can stay, we should talk about that. That's how serious this is. This is not a joke. This is the real deal. Dr. Shealy's with us. Kyle's with us in Montana. Dr. Shealy and Kyle, in China right now, there's a bounty of 1,000 yuan. It's about $140 for each person reported by the residents to the government. So if a person suspects someone of being in Wuhan and they are potentially contagious, there's a $140 reward for turning them in.
Oh, it's getting beyond comedy. The whole situation.
Well, it's got to be very, very serious for that. And not only is there a reward, but the residents are tearing up their own roads to prevent others, outsiders, if you want to call them that, from coming in. This is like Survivors, the series from BBC that I gave as homework over a year ago. Homework that you should watch, this series, BBC series, 1970s, called Survivors. And then there's a newer one. And that was homework as well. And then Jericho was another one. And then The Walking Dead was another homework assignment. If you tie all these together, that, and The Stand, that is the coronavirus. That is what we are facing. So, Kyle, any comments about tearing up roads? Makes sense to me.
Well, except that, if people, Vince, I have seen this throughout my whole life, and I'm sure you have too. People, people see something. All of a sudden, then it dawns on them how serious it is. Okay, this is like prepping or anything else. It's what's going to happen. My dad used to say, Americans wake up when their guts are out. So what happens is, because he was in Korea and dealt with a lot of terrible stuff. Anyway, you see something, and then there's a realization process where they see how serious it is. But what they do then is the pendulum swings to the whole other side of complete emotional reaction rather than conscious, logical reaction. And to tear up the roads means also that no help is coming. That if you've got somebody in there that's got that, and this thing has a 14-day incubation period, you've just sealed your doom for the whole place. I had another question, Vince. I had heard a report that if you took all of the provinces, and I don't know, like I'm not on the internet, so I don't know how to I don't really care about finding out all this stuff totally because it's not affecting me right now. But, I mean, it is in the sense that I'm buying auto parts, the things that I think I'm going to need that I know only come from China. I bought a whole bunch of them just last week. Anyway, I've heard that if you take all the provinces that are affected, that they've closed off or trying to quarantine, that it affects a total of close to 60 million people. Have you heard or read anything like that?
Yes, that is the number of about a week ago, and now it's way bigger than that. And there's another report. Let's see if I can find this. They're saying, let me see if I can find it. Okay, this is on Zero Hedge. Headlines: in shocking admission, World Health Organization advisor says coronavirus may infect over 5 billion. That's with a B. People. 5 billion people. And right now, yeah.
Can you imagine?
That's how,
let's just say that is complete emotional reaction, that it's just hype, okay? But China's 3 or something like that billion people.
About 1.5 now.
Yeah. But let's think, what would happen if just 400 million of those people died?
Oh, just think about the smell. Just think about where you're going to get all the fuel for the backhoes to dig the graves, or the fuel to burn the bodies. We'll be right back. And David, I see you're on hold. Kyle's with us, David's on hold, and Dr. Norman Shealy is in the front of the classroom. Quite some time ago, I mentioned Jericho, the television series, and I said you have to watch it. It's required homework. And we were talking with Kyle and Dr. Shealy about digging up the roads. What's happening in China is the residents are digging up their own roads to prevent outsiders from coming in. In Jericho, that happened, except it wasn't a road. It was a bridge. And what the town was going to do is blow up the bridge that led to the town. Now, after the apocalypse, building a bridge is going to be really hard. It's actually not going to happen for a long time, maybe a century. So what the people of Jericho were going to do, some wanted to blow up the bridge and prevent the outsiders from coming to Jericho. Others said, are you kidding? This is the way we get to the world from Jericho. This is the way we go there, which is exactly what Kyle was saying. So it's a real serious problem. But in China, that's what the villagers are doing. They're digging up their roads because they don't want to die. And I understand that too. Here's just a thought. Let me say this quickly, and I cannot tell you why I'm saying this. I know why, but I can't tell you. So let me say it this way. Got 22s? Got bore ciders? By the way, bore ciders are made in China. You can still get them in the caliber of your choice. And I suggest you consider going to the RK Gun Show if you're in near Lebanon, Missouri. That's this weekend. Look up the gun shows, and I think I might attend one of them. So those are some thoughts. And also, what is the biggest threat to people getting sick in the planet today, or on the planet today? Airplanes, number 1. Ships, number 2. Number 3, transportation. Number 4, international companies importing goods. That's my list of how people can get sick the fastest. Those industries. Airplanes, ships, transportation, and international companies importing goods. And that's what's happening.
Vince, and I got one more thing to say. I agree with you completely. I really do. Always have, pretty much. About 99% of all we talk about. I got one more thing, and then I'll let Dave get on here too. folks, for the flu and the regular cold, and this, I'll tell you right up front, this is not for the faint of heart, but it does work. You were talking about putting colloidal silver in and breathing it in. We have done that, but the best effective treatment we have found for practically killing colds or anything like that in very short order is to take a cup of boiling water and put 1 drop or 2, or you could do 2, but usually 1 or 2 drops is enough to drop it right on top of that boiling water, put a towel over your head, and breathe in those fumes. Now, I will tell you for a fact, it is not for the faint of heart, but it will work.
A drop or
it is
a drop or 2 of what? A drop or 2 of what?
Oregano. Oh, I'm sorry, oregano oil.
Okay.
Put a drop or 2 of oregano oil in that hot boiling water, and then breathe the fumes in. Try to put a towel over your head so you can get as much of it as you can. And but like I said, it's rough, but it will work. It's amazing how that works.
And are you saying for a pneumonia, or are you saying for a cold, or are you saying a respiratory infection? What are you saying?
A respiratory infection, a cold, flu. I've never tried anything like that we've never had a pneumonia. My wife and I never have had that. So I don't know that it'll work for that. I haven't tried it, but I do know for colds, flu, respiratory infection, sinus infection, it even works for that too. It really helps. It's amazing.
Dr. Shealy, your thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, obviously, I have no way of knowing. As long as you don't burn yourself, it would be safe.
Okay. Kyle, one of our other instructors, Kurt Wilson, has said exactly the same thing. So there's 2. There's 2 instructors who have said that. Now, Kurt Wilson, I don't believe has said that on the air, but he said that to me privately on the phone. So there's got to be something to it. So, class, do your own research, okay? Go to DuckDuckGo as a search engine, if that's the one you want to use, and do some research and see what you come up with. So, as always, don't believe anything we say, and that's just a legal disclaimer. We tell you the things that we do, but if you get hurt, don't come back and beat us up. Do your own research, please.
Yep. All righty. I'll see you, Vince. I'll let Dave get on here.
One quick question, Kyle, very quickly.
Sure.
Have you ever used a bore cider? Have you ever used a bore cider?
Constantly, yeah, you bet. I've got 2 or 3 of them.
Okay, and are they the kind that are the size of a cartridge that you put in that have a laser that fire a laser beam out the barrel, and you can aim it at the target and adjust your scope to that red dot on the target, and that'll get you pretty close to where you need to be without wasting ammunition? That's what a bore sighter is. Is that the kind you use, or do you use the kind that you stick on the end of the barrel?
I have both, Vince. The one that I have, in all honesty, the one that I have found to be the most accurate is that old design that you stick into your bore, and it goes and it gives you a little target that you look through with your
right.
Scope, and you adjust
right.
it on the end. I have found that to be, at least mine, I don't know about everybody else's, but mine happens to be extremely accurate. If I get it dead on in that little picture, I'm usually within 2 inches at 100 yards of what I'm aiming at.
Okay, very good. Kyle, thanks so much for being with us.
You bet. See you then.
David in Illinois, welcome. You're on with Dr. Norm Shealy.
How you doing? You had to talk about burning bodies. I'll tell you what, if somebody ever smells it and is around burning flesh, it's something you don't want to do again.
I agree. And my dad, coming back from World War II, he was in the Philippines, and he was around that stuff, and he was a sergeant. And he said, son, you will never forget the smell of rotting flesh. And you can say that as bodies, as a result of war, the dead, it's just unbearable. And if you think about that, that's where we're headed. Actually, China's there now. And if you think about burning bodies, that's what's been done for 1,000 years or more. So when people have a disease and it's contagious, the bodies get thrown on a pile and they get burned. They get burned with wood and whatever fuel. That's what happens. Dr. Shealy, is that the best way, or is there better?
I've experienced it in India, where on the banks of the Ganges River, I witnessed 3 cremations, if you will, and it wasn't so bad because I got there when they were pretty well, almost down to skeletons.
Well, I can tell you that we have, in the wintertime, like if a cow dies and we put it in our outside wood furnace to dispose of the dead body, you smell it for days. And it's not pleasant. It's not like a barbecue, that's for sure. David?
Yeah, the first time I smelled human flesh burning, I could, oh man. I was white as a ghost. I almost collapsed. I just couldn't handle it, no. But anyways, I need to ask, we're going to order some of your vitamin D, but beforehand I wanted to find out because vitamin C is something we haven't really, I know we should have put it in our, supplement, but we haven't. But what vitamin C do you recommend? Do you carry it so I can maximize my shipping?
Well, I use Dr. Shealy's Youth Formula, which contains 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams of MSM, a little bit of molybdenum, and a trace of beta-1,3 glucan. And you take 4 of those a day. And I've been on that for years.
Okay. And you have that. Now, I take it they brought up, I believe Kyle is his name, he brought up colloidal silver. You don't carry that, do you?
We do not carry that.
Okay.
I personally used to use a lot of it and recommend Argentyn 23, Argentyn 23.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
I was going to prepare a kit for sale at USA Prepares for $20 years ago, but there was so little interest in it that I gave up. It didn't make sense to manufacture this kit. But for $20, you could make your own colloidal silver. And what I was going to suggest to our class is you can buy a fine wire and use that as the electrode. So what you do is you take a quart jar, a mason jar, and you put water in it, distilled water, and then you put these 2 fine wires and 27 volts of battery current, direct current, and use a resistor to limit the amount of current. And, several hours later you have colloidal silver. Well, you need a total dissolved solids meter to test that, and you get those from, guess where? China. And that will tell you how many parts per million of colloidal silver you have. Now I was thinking, so that's what most people recommend on the internet, but I think there's a better way. And that better way would be using government minted. This is one place where I think the government does a good job. And this would be the Canadian government. They have Canadian silver maples. That's 1 ounce of quad 9, so 0.9999 pure silver. That's pretty much as good as it gets. And you can buy them, and then you could dip part of, use an alligator clip. Now, you don't want the alligator clip to get into the distilled water. You want to keep that above the distilled water. And so you suspend the Canadian maples, the silver maples, in the distilled water, and use 2 of those. And then when you're all done, you still have the maples. You can always use them for silver. Okay, they're still silver. They'll be just a little bit less each time that you make your colloidal silver. But you're not taking that much weight off them. They hardly even notice after a first couple of uses. You probably wouldn't even notice except for maybe some discoloration. But that's how you can begin the study of making your own colloidal silver generator. And that's what I would suggest you consider doing. Now, don't believe me. I suggest you do your own homework and see if it makes sense. But it makes more sense to trust the Canadian Mint for the purity of the silver than it does to trust some guy on eBay and buy some wire that he's cut off a big roll that who knows where it came from. Right? Those are my thoughts, David. And yeah, that's exactly right. David, please stay with us if you'd like. Dr. Shealy and I'll be right back. Class, for weeks now, we have been advising that you pay attention to the supply chain. We've been saying that it comes from China, whatever it is, either in part or in whole. And if you think you need it, you ought to get it before it becomes less available. And I believe I'm already seeing cracks in the supply chain here in the United States. Just even automotive parts. I'm just going to give you one quick example and then back to David and Dr. Shealy. If you go to AutoZone and you buy an oil filter for whatever car you have, Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge, doesn't matter, and it has the AutoZone brand on it, STP, they're made in China. If you buy some Fram filters, some of them, if you open up the box, it says made in China. If you buy some Fram filters that are bright orange and they're spin-on filters, some of them for the old standard sizes, the common ones, made in China. Not all of them, but a lot of them. A real lot. Probably, I'm thinking, more than half. So keep that in mind, that if you think there's always tomorrow, there is not always tomorrow. David, any comments?
No, I agree with you. I mean, everything's selling out quick. I mean, I'm seeing everything selling out quick, too, and waiting. I've even seen people trying to just buy other things and putting pre-orders in, and their orders are canceled, and they have to pay more. So,
Are you talking about on the Internet? You're seeing orders canceled?
Yeah, they're having problems with supply. Some people are saying there's problems with supply and demand, especially with, things like ammo or situations where some of that, if the supplier can't get it, they have to get it again. Now they have to pay a higher price for it, so the prices are going up a little bit. It's just something that anyways.
One of our class went to a gun show in Kansas City over the weekend. It was absolutely packed. I was not there, but it was absolutely wall to wall, the Arcade Gun Show in Kansas City, Missouri. So, Dr. Shealy, any comments about what you think we should do medically or physically or whatever kind of preparedness?
Well, you never did tell us how to disinfect our mail.
Okay. What I did was I bought ultraviolet lights, ultraviolet C, UVC, and that's what I'm going to use. I bought them a long time ago for this purpose, and I thought, well, I'll have it. And now I've got to put it together. So I just bought a case, believe it or not, of ultraviolet tubes. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants these ultraviolet lights. It's the dumbest thing. So I bought a case of them to make sure that I can build the ultraviolet disinfection. So I'm going to put it in every room, and of course I'm going to expose mail and packages in a box because you can't look at ultraviolet. Ultraviolet light will blind you. So do not look at it. It's like looking at the sun. I'm going to build a box, and every package that comes in is going to be put in there. It's going to be handled with gloves and a respirator or a face mask first, very carefully. It's going to sit in there for probably an hour before it comes in the house. That's the plan.
And after you open it, redo it.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So this thing of, who doesn't? If you don't do this, please raise your hand. So you get the mail and we put it on the kitchen table, right? Isn't that what we do, class? Or we put it on the counter? Isn't that what we do? We always do that. Well, we can't do that anymore. And those packages that you bring into your house, you might want to leave them in the sun for a while. Okay? If they come from UPS or Federal Express or the U.S. Mail, why don't you leave them on that side of your house or your apartment or your whatever you have out in the sun. Why don't you do that? And then turn it over and get the bottom side of it, too. I think that would be the safe thing to do, because even if your package is okay, it was in the same truck as all the other packages, handled by a whole bunch of people who you don't know and probably don't even like, if you did know them. Those are just some of the thoughts, Dr. Shealy. And one other thing, UV lights, they use ballasts. The driver, if you will, the electronic driver of these fluorescent lights. Well, we killed the fluorescent light business in the United States. We killed it. Our government had so many regulations about it, so we killed it. So the manufacturers who make the ballasts are done. They're gone. The only ballasts you can find are the ones that have already been made. And they're old and used and probably rusted. And the price is going up. And that's because your government allowed this to happen. So your government encouraged you to buy LED lighting from the Chi-Coms, the communist Chinese. And those boats are stuck. And they are probably not coming to a port near you. How about that? Dr. Shealy, thank you so much. I'm sorry to dispense such depressing news, but I believe it's real. David, any last thoughts? Do you think this is real, or is this our imagination?
Oh, I definitely think it's real, and I'm worried about the availability of needles down the road.
There you go. Well, get what you need now, class. Watch Jericho. Watch Survivors, the BBC series from the 70s. Watch The Walking Dead. And that's where we are right now. Gentlemen, thank you so much.